apologies and leave of absence. I don't think we have any to record today. Is that correct?
Okay.
Correct.
Just move. Yeah, no, that's carried. The confirmation of the status of agenda is before us. Is there anything else in this open agenda that anyone wants to add? Otherwise, I will seek a mover and a seconder to confirm the status of the agenda, please. Thanks, David. Second, Garth. All those in favour? Carried. The disclosures of interest are there for your noting on page 5. If anyone has any interest to disclose, do so at this time, or to update, please let Matt know. So we will note the disclosures of interest and now move to the minutes of the 21st of September. Does anybody have any corrections or in relation to those minutes? No. Righty-ho. I can have someone move and second that those minutes are true and accurate. Thank you, Garth. Second, David. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Right, moving now to our reports. So we have 2 representatives here from Watercare and Aroha, the actions register, noting that some of the actions will be addressed later in the agenda, particularly around health and safety. So if we move to page 20, I'm just trying to talk us through. Carol, who will lead us through this action register for today?
We've got a bit of a mix. So the first one we've just done on the Te Kaupara water take consents. We've done some initial inquiries with Waikato Regional Council and had some discussions internally, and we'll plan to come back to the board early next calendar year. On that, it does look like to put a placeholder, we would have to do a full application rather than just an initial placeholder, which we don't have budget for either at this point to do the full works, but we're having a look into that. The second and third item, both their papers and presentations in the meeting. The fourth item, the Metro Waste Project. Roger, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and rest of the board. So look, that particular item,
You're on mute, Roger.
Yep, there we go. Did you hear the beginning of that? Yep, no, okay. I'm aware you're waiting for a paper on that one, and so still trying to just pull together the information at the moment. Ultimately, projects that are underway, I'm trying to understand how far through they are in terms of how they've been set up to deal with the engagement with mana whenua. I'm also looking at the Watercare Way, which is what council has subscribed to, and how that lines up with the Metro Waste project and the new ways of doing things that Jackie Collier mentioned in the last meeting. So I'm just still trying to pull together those pieces of information and saying what would be the most appropriate way forward for current projects and new ones based on those commitments and those new frameworks that are appearing. So that will come in the next Water Governance Board meeting.
So if I can just add, I guess my recollection of the item that was being discussed at the time was really in relation to the Te Kaupara wastewater treatment plant specifically, and how we might ensure that the undertakings that the board had made to Ngā Moka and mana whenua representatives some time ago now are followed through, but also just ensuring that there's alignment between the various sub-regional sort of strategic projects that council are involved in and the specific projects that we're also delivering.
Oh, thank you for that clarification, Jackie. We'll Matt, if we can capture those in the actions a little bit in the way that Jackie's raised them, then that will help frame that up better for next time.
I think, Roger, there's a couple of papers that touch on it in the course of today's meeting as well. So I think we'll be able to, with everybody on the call, I think we'll be able to get a clearer picture of how we are following through with the representations we have made and how we connect with the other bits of work that Jackie's alluded to ensure overall we've got a comprehensive approach to engagement.
Excellent, thank you.
Madam Chair, Sam will touch on it in his presentation as well.
Yeah, Kpis, thank you. So if we just, over the page, just risk register is coming back in December. We'll look to the health and safety matters in the next report. So if there's nothing further on the action register from directors, I'd like to just move the receipt and go into the main body of the pack. Kpis, okay. Moved Gavin, second David, to receive the action register. All those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, now we are on to the health and safety report. So just acknowledge Watercare representatives for being here today to talk us through. Oh, actually, sorry, we're not at the health and safety. We're at the water governance, the Three Waters governance report. Aroha, you are next. You're first on my agenda, but in the pack we have the Three Waters governance report up first. So perhaps if I can hand it over to you, Matthew.
Thank you. So I don't think we have a specific point in the pack that represents the health and safety, so we can do that after presenting the governance report, though. That'd be great. So obviously taking the report as read, some of the key items that we have referenced there was the challenging month that the production team had over the last 6 weeks, and we briefly referred to the Huntly events in the last governance board meeting. And referenced that the event had occurred and it had put quite a strain on the production team operating 24/7 to manage the water quality event that affected Huntly. Thankfully, as I explained in the last governance board meeting, that event was managed without any impact to customers, which was a great outcome. But it did highlight some concerns around the plant and where that event actually occurred. Now, we've been unable over the last 6 weeks to identify the cause of the event, working with Waikato Regional Council and others. And at this stage, unfortunately, I'm not very confident we will confirm what caused the actual event. Thankfully, it hasn't occurred again. And we will be, one of the challenges we'll be looking at is what we need to do with the Huntly water treatment plant over the coming years to actually address some of that to reduce the risk of an event having such a large impact again. There were 2 performance measures that were not achieved in the month. They were response within 60 minutes to urgent faults and resolution of urgent faults within 120 minutes. Sorry, let me confirm the time frame. I think it was 160. Apologies. 120 minutes. This event is quite unusual for us. We've been pretty consistent on achieving these targets. Partly that was due to quite a low number of jobs throughout the month, and with some complex ones included. So normally we do around 15 to 20 jobs in a month. In September we only did 8. So on a positive side, obviously less urgent jobs through to what's happening with the network. But obviously we'll be monitoring really closely how we respond to those events in the coming months to ensure that we do achieve those. For the year to date, though, we are achieving the required outcomes. The other point of note was the impact of COVID and the lockdowns. So in particular, one of the impacts was on the Merrimeri plant, restricting access from our contractor who whilst we're in the commissioning period of the plant. Our contractor continues to operate that plant. Now, because of COVID restrictions and level 3 and 4 restrictions, they weren't able to access the plant. So the production team stepped up, Rhiannon in particular, to continue the commissioning activities to ensure that we didn't lose approximately about a month's worth of time if we hadn't been able to continue the biomass of the seed sludge. So so that was quite a positive out of what could have been quite a difficult delay that would have occurred. No health and safety issues in the month as well, which was a good positive after having the event from the previous reporting. And you will also notice that we have put a real focus on driving performance across the team and across Watercare as a whole, in fact, and that has shown some real improvements. And what we've identified is we have some areas across the region where unfortunately the speed traffic doesn't really align with what the system's saying, so we're addressing those with e-roads, and also just making sure that it's front and center of people's thinking whenever they're in a vehicle, that they're aware that there is zero tolerance for any speeding. Beyond that, there are a few other points of interest in the paper. Obviously, the Mary wetlands flooding, which is due to some very high weather events that we had throughout the period as well, which have been managed, and the ongoing work around growth across the region. But other than that, as I mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit more about compliance later in the board meeting. So if there's any specific questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Matt. I'll now open it up to directors. I see Gavin and David have their hands up. So, Gavin, perhaps.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Matt, if you just bear with me, this is it's kind of related because you've talked about Mary and some of the challenges there because of the lockdown. One of the questions that I've been asked is from Councillor Patterson's committee is for an update on progress around the capital works, what we might expect to see before the end of the year. So what I wanted to flag, Madam Chair, was that the next meeting of Infrastructure Committee is beginning of December. So I'd like to get something from Watercare before then that the board can consider, and then so that I can provide a report back to the Infrastructure Committee beginning of December. So just wanted to flag that, Madam Chair, just an update around where we expect to be with the capital works, bearing in mind the impacts of lockdowns.
Okay, perfect. Happy to do that, Kevin. I'll provide that to you before.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So that's an action item noted there to come back with the update prior to the Infrastructure Committee meeting in December. David, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Ruku. Just three quick queries for clarification. Matthew, under 4.1 Stormwater, page 27 of the pack, there's a paragraph, there's a comment noting that receipt of a letter that legalised the pipe in 2006, which suggests their previous response needs to be revised. Just what's the implications of that? Is that we are actually compliant?
That's our hope, David. Yeah. So this is the Canberra Road event. That's the one outstanding action in the abatement notice for Raglan Stormwater. And so there's been a lot of backwards and forwards around this between the owners of the property, WRC and ourselves. And what's happened is a letter has been found that legalised a pipe that previously the regional council didn't believe was legal. And we were going to have to take a number of actions to address that pipe. So if the pipe is found to be legal, then those actions won't be required. It will require an update of the people's limb and details against the property, which would be a much smaller impact than actually doing work. So we're just waiting for WRC to confirm their view on that. We haven't had that back yet.
Right, and thank you for that. No doubt you'll bring that to our attention once you get that clarified. Under 6 compliance, the first dot point, and again it's page 30. Have we had the results back yet in terms of compliance with why comply? or are we still awaiting those results?
For this,
Compliance.
no, we haven't. No, we wouldn't normally expect that back for quite a period of time, to be perfectly honest. It can take a while to come back. And with Taumata ROI coming in as of the 15th of November, I think there is going to be a bit of disruption to that. So we're working with the Y Comply, and we are working to help them close out their activities. And I've got a meeting with Taumata ROI this weekend, and we'll be working via council to work with them around how this will work going forward.
Thank you. And just the third on page 32, the KPIs, you indicated that the ones we were non-compliant with was in some way due to a lesser number. But am I interpreting this correctly under, for example, where it says September 66, and that we were an average or a median of 66 minutes, and result equals 32 being 32 call outs? Is that correct? Is that how I interpret that table?
No, apologies, Dave. No, so it's the response time. So it's 66 minutes in September, but 32 minutes on average across the year, the median average of the year. It is median, not average. That's the DIA reporting mechanism. So across the year to date, we're 32 minutes, but in September it was 66 minutes.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, what I'm struggling to understand is if you've had a lesser number of call-outs, why that should impact on the average time. The issue is if these are critical call-outs, then we should be meeting the KPIs or the targets that we've set. So I don't see why having a lesser number means that runs the risk of therefore being over the KPI target.
No, I agree with you. It was a point of interest, just that we had less numbers of jobs in that month, so 8 compared to generally double that. That does mean any outliers will have a much larger effect. It doesn't balance out, but with the median, it really is irrelevant. I agree.
Right. So what's important is that the median or each one, but I would assume that if it's urgent, every response should be either under 60 minutes or under 120, depending on those whether they're urgent.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting point. So the median is the DIA reporting requirement, so that's what we report. Obviously, every job being under 60 minutes is absolutely the goal. Not always realistic, unfortunately, with the number of jobs and when they occur. But that's generally what we are aiming for, to have every job under 60 minutes. But the actual reporting that we put in here is the DIA reference reporting, which is the median for the month.
Okay, we'll obviously leave it with you, but just would urge that if we can ensure that our call outs do come within, each call out does come within the times that we're setting, that would be desirable.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
And thanks, David. Jackie, and then Garth.
Kia ora, Matt. Just a couple of questions
Kia ora,
from me. Section 4, the Meremere bypass. Can you just explain what a time bypass discharge is?
Yeah, absolutely. So under the consent that we operate at the moment, we are allowed to discharge at specific hours of the day due to capacity constraints and plant constraints due to large events, etc. At the moment, because the plant was built on the platform of the plant was built on an aspect of the pond that we had to fill in, it resulted in reduced capacity of the ponds to manage those events, which has resulted in more time bypasses. So essentially us discharging waste outside of when we would normally do it, and with reduced treatment. So we work with WRC on every one of those events and notify them. The new consent allows for a greater level of discharge across the greater periods of time throughout the day, in fact, across the whole day, which means that we won't have to discharge, we won't be notifying WRC of discharges outside of the normal times that we're allowed to.
So do those discharges outside of the consent conditions, are they considered a breach by the regional council?
I believe they would be, yes, absolutely, and we work with them really closely on that. We've worked with them exceptionally closely on the whole project, but they would consider it a breach, yes.
What are we doing, or can we do, to try and reduce the potential for that to happen between now and the new plant coming online?
We've done everything we can to utilize the holding of the ponds and the treatment plant as it operates. It has been challenging because we've had very high weather events across the period of commissioning as well. The commissioning is due to be completed in November. So at that point, the new plant will be on board. We're going through the final stages of it now, essentially. So I'm not, at this stage, I don't believe there's anything more the team could have done to have reduced the overflows. Anything we could do, we are doing, but it has been challenging.
What's the response from regional council and our stakeholders been to the situation?
The regional council's been supportive of, accepting the measures that we've put in place to reduce the events occurring and working with us around the fact that we're working towards the elimination of this through the new plant and the commissioning of that. So they're aware of everything that we're doing at the moment. And whilst obviously nobody accepts this as being what we want to have happen, they understand that every measure has been taken to try and avoid it.
Are we keeping our mana whenua partners informed of what's happening here?
I'd have to, I'm not sure specifically on the communication to mana whenua. I'd have to confirm with the team around that and who we do notify, but I'll follow up on that for you and get back to you on that if that's okay.
Yeah, if you could please, Matt. A previous action that's been identified through the board is just consistency in notification in relation to overflows and any network failures with the relevant mana whenua groups. If we can make sure that that happens, it'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Section 4.1, stormwater management. Yes, I'd really welcome a bit of a deep dive at another time on the work that's being done on stormwater and what some of the implications of MPS freshwater might look like for the district, and also what the decision-making process and interface looks like between Watercare and I guess our planning team for the full cycle of stormwater design, vesting, and then I guess operation and maintenance. So it's really just a request through you, Madam Chair, just to get a deeper understanding. I'm aware that things are getting quite challenging across the region, which is a good thing in terms of giving effect to Te Ture Whaimana, but just really keen to make sure that Waikato District are in front of things in the lead up to having to renew the comprehensive discharge consent.
That sounds great, Jackie. We've got Andrew Baldero, who we've brought in specifically to help start to improve some of the stormwater issues that we've had, and he's done really well, and is also working across region and has done multiple presentations to cross-region entities as well. So I'm happy to have him present an overview of how things are going and what more we can do, because there's always more we can do, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it would be useful for him to engage with Hamilton City Council on the work that's being done there, which is probably at the forefront of what's going on within the region and potentially across the country.
Absolutely. No, that'd be great.
That's it from me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. Garth.
Thanks, Ruku. Just a couple of questions. Waikato, sorry, the Tekawara wastewater treatment plant talks about the plant shut down due to the operator being unfamiliar with how the plant runs in manual mode. Do we have what lessons have we learned there? What will be different next time, resulted in what looks to be some, I don't know, fairly reasonably expensive tanker deliveries?
Sorry, I'm just so for the Tekawara shutdown. So the aspect of unfamiliar is because it's exceptionally unusual for this to have occurred. So the actuator valve failing and obviously taking longer to renew meant that the plant couldn't be operated safely in a manual mode. So that is something that we're looking at to confirm. It doesn't
say safe, it just says operating in an unfamiliar manual mode. So it doesn't, if safety's fair enough, but just unfamiliar, if it's not, you might need to change the wording if it's a safety issue, but it reads like there's an operator competency issue.
No, I appreciate that, Garth. No, I understand what you're saying. No, at this stage, it's both, really, to be perfectly honest. If the operators were competent and working overnight with the manual, then it would have been an option, but it wasn't an option due to the competency and the risk to safety because of that. So are
we changing anything off the back of that?
At this stage, we'll be looking at how manual mode is operated and making sure we've got a more detailed SOP around that, and ensuring that if we do need to do that, because if it had gone for an extended period, then that would have probably been a requirement. So just making sure that we have the staff
Yeah,
appropriately
because
trained for that.
obviously someone's got to work out during the day.
During the day, yes, that's right. So
Yeah, someone's worked out how to make it go. So kind of why couldn't it run at night? It's my kind of question, and whether there's a competency issue or what, I don't know. There's something not quite right here in terms of the way it's described. It might be the description. Okay, short form.
I believe so. I believe it is simply that the person who was on call overnight didn't have the competency to run the
Right.
plant
So
in manual.
then I'm going to ask you guys about what are you doing about competency training of operators?
So again, back to my point before around an appropriate SOP of being available to that person and an escalation have been put in place, which didn't occur in this case. Yeah.
What you guys are paid for. Mary's interesting. What's your maximum plausible flood design for your new plant? You talk about significant water events, but honestly, we haven't had them. So what is the flood design of your water treatment plant at Mary?
I might actually pass it over, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but Peter, do you have an answer to that question at all, Peter? Peter's our project manager for the Mary plant. If you don't, that's okay.
I can't answer it only vaguely. So the actual catchment for Mary, so I'm just going to provide a couple of quick corrections, really. The level of treatment at Mary has always been the same. It's an oxidation pond. Then it had what was referred to as a day pond, where an element of flow was stored, so it could then be pumped out at night. So we've basically been providing the same level of treatment throughout the project build.
Mm-hmm.
Its status, it is existing. Because it's a small catchment, it's very responsive to small storms.
Yeah.
So the actual return period and storm level of late, I can't answer. I don't know. Other than qualitatively, I can say that the storms have been short and intense, which is
okay. So I'm okay with the existing. The new one.
Yeah.
What have you designed for?
So we're going to operate the pond with a variable level, which is new. It's something that isn't a feature built into the current setup. So it'll have more retention available to it. What storm period, return period can it handle going forward? I'd have to come back to you on that. It's designed to treat 250 meters cubed a day, which is well above the population that it currently has. Obviously, everything over is storm flow, which is something you don't want to receive. And at what point do we have a storm flow where we have to discharge more than the new consent is a good question. It's not something I have an answer for.
I hope someone in the design team had to think about that before they sized the plant. Because otherwise, you're going to face Jackie's problem, right? You're going to be forever in front of the regional council with breaches.
Yeah.
I can confirm the current plant has sufficient capacity. The question is, it's oversized. There is a consent limit that once you're over a 90 percentile storm, that you can pump more than the maximum meters cubed per day. And basically what would happen is you'd trigger that consent condition.
It'd just be interesting to know, just because it looks like we're getting these, I understand with the existing but set up, but I'm just concerned that we've designed the thing to meet the kind of changing climatic conditions that we're all experiencing. So
I think the other point, Garth, is because the new consent that will be implemented once the commissioning is completed allows for all-day discharging of treated waste. Obviously, that allows better management of the pond levels, etc., just to ensure we have some catchment available.
All right. Design criteria has just got me. So sorry, moving on. Thanks for that. 5.3, just the SCADA stuff that's going on. Perhaps we catch up a bit later on in terms of where we're tracking with this. Is the SCADA project different to the one which is also being funded and talks about in finance, which is only about 20% complete? I'm just kind of wondering what's going on with the time and costs of this SCADA system upgrade and then everything else around it. And happy for you to describe that later to us if you wish.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. There are two aspects to it, absolutely, which is the lift and shift, and then the telemetry equipment replacement, which is much larger. So
Yeah,
happy
so
to talk in more detail later.
Tuakau Pocono Pipeline, an independent assessment has provided an estimated scheme cost, which is higher than the initial estimate. Interesting options to keep the cost checked, I assume, are being looked at and reviewed.
That is actually a paper and a discussion point that we'll be bringing in the next governance board meeting, absolutely, to talk to in much more detail.
Okay, and then again, under compliance heading, just this issue around water care has requested the lab to flush the sampling tap longer before collecting any Plimo solvent related samples. Sounds like there's not a standard work procedure. How are you sampling? I mean, why the change? And I would have thought that this was a routine thing which would be against the standard work procedure.
Yeah, which it is. So this was essentially because the sample came back with a positive lead result, which was obviously a significant concern, but subsequent testing confirmed that it was an anomaly. So we've just the most likely cause of that was the individual who's done that test not following the SOP and flushing the tap appropriately. And so we're just reinforcing that with the lab to make sure that they're aware that it's not acceptable to reduce that time frame. Individuals, so reinforcing with their team.
The lab, the operator, you mean? Yeah. Okay.
No, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. No. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I had.
Awesome. Great discussion from the board, Matt. Really, I've got nothing further to add, but just note that there are a few key action points to come out of that discussion, in particular consideration around comms to mana whenua in relation to the mere, what do you call it? The
discharges, yeah.
Yep. And other stakeholders, actually. I understand regional council, we've worked closely alongside them, but our stakeholders, our mana whenua understand that we're working towards setting up this new plant. So I think it just helps alleviate any anxiety when they read about these things in the newspaper or driving past, if they understand kind of where we're at. So I think it's important to get those comms out. I'm supportive of the deep dive session around stormwater. I actually thought that was really interesting, given it's a key component of our Water Care Council contract. It would be good to understand it, as Jackie has alluded to, in our context. To Garth's point around the Te Kaupata wastewater treatment plant, appreciate that you are taking a closer look at that. You've highlighted competency, but there may be other lessons learned. So I think it would be good to get an update on where you actually land on that. If it is beyond an update of the procedural standard. Again, just picking up on Garth's comment for the this is for the new plant at Mere. It will be good to understand whether the flood design for that does prevent overflows in the future, or where we're not having to be in constant breach, as has already been made. And I think too, just the impact of climate change. It is important that we understand that the design features will accommodate. Appreciate it won't be perfect, but to avoid the extent to what we're getting those overflows now will be good to understand. So I'll leave it at that, noting a number of actions arising from the report, and perhaps just Matt, if I give it to you to lead your team around the health and safety update. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'll introduce Bronwyn again, who is our Health and Safety and Wellness Head. And so we are going to be bringing up a presentation that Bronwyn will be going through, and Bronwyn will do the presentation, but I will support any questions that need to come out of that. Are you okay to bring up the presentation, Bronwyn?
I think so, Matt, with any luck. I haven't used Zoom before, but I think I know, I think it's okay. So I'm wondering if you can see that screen.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Good.
Right.
Okay, great. So kia ora, everybody. Unfortunately, I think you didn't get the presentation in time for it to go into the board pack. So I'll go through the presentation reasonably quickly, and then perhaps questions at the end. We'll draw out those bits that are most useful for discussion. So the first part of it, the first part is that I just wanted to show you our board and CE commitment to health and safety for our team. So this is sort of our policy written for the team to demonstrate to them our commitment as an organisation. But in fact, what people refer to more commonly is this card, which is given to everybody at their induction. And it's a specific commitment from our chief executive that our team can carry with them. And what it does is it reinforces the mandate for them to stop work if they believe that it's not safe. And it requires also a commitment from our team to do the same, because what we know is our team are actually really competent and they often will know that things aren't quite right. And this is that reminder that if work isn't quite right or if something feels unsafe about it, that the work should be stopped. So looking at how we're working on health, safety and wellbeing for our team, that our 3 areas of focus are around our people, because they're our priority. And in fact, they're that's the group who are going to get hurt. Our people are going to get hurt. So we need them engaged in our health, safety and wellbeing process. Leadership is critical to be aligned with our people and to provide direction and vision. And our systems also are really important, not because we want to have the best system in the world, but because we have to have a system that makes health, safety and wellbeing as easy as we can make it for our team. So the purpose of this diagram is, a standard Venn diagram, but the idea here is not that we make any of those circles bigger or smaller, but more that we try and align or overlap them as much as possible so that our systems support our people to do work. Our systems also provide our leadership team with information that is useful and timely for decision making, and that our people and leaders are aligned and have the same purpose around health, safety and wellbeing, and that our people feel supported by their leaders. Now, this picture is quite interesting and it talks about stuff like friendship and intimacy and love and all that sort of stuff. But why I find it's really useful is that it talks about well-being as the overarching priority. So what it means is that health and safety are part of an individual's well-being when they're at work. So our overall purpose really is to ensure that everybody has, that everybody's well-being is maximised at work. So where safety fits in is really around those physiological needs that need to be at work and know that you're not going to fall from something, you're not going to have something drop on top of you, that the equipment that you're using is safe and the procedures are safe and so on. When it talks about safety needs, it's more psychological safety that it's talking about there. So it's about things like security of tenure and the ability to come to work to be your authentic self. So it does cover things like bullying and harassment as well. Our health needs are covered both in the physiological and the safety needs. And so what it's saying is, often we prioritise safety or we talk about safety and we focus on safety, but safety is actually only a component of the overall well-being for that individual. So for them to deliver their best every day, which is really the mantra that the health, safety and wellbeing team operate under, is that people need to be safe. They need to have an environment that is physically and psychologically healthy, but they also need to belong in an organisation, have a sense of connection to what they're doing. They need to have good leaders. They need to have an opportunity to develop and grow within an organisation. And importantly, that ultimate step is to get to that time, that opportunity to give back, which is, you know, when we really know we've nailed it. The plan on the page for our team for this year, and admittedly, this is derailed a bit because of COVID. So what it's meant, I didn't include our timelines in this because they're all changing quite quickly because of the COVID lockdowns and restrictions that we have. But our work centres around 5 key areas. So leadership and governance is around all of that stuff that provides our board and our leaders assurance around health, safety and wellbeing. We've got a piece of work around people capability and engagement, and I note that you've discussed that just recently, just in this conversation with Matthew. And that's part of our connection with the learning and development team as well. Excuse me. Our systems, as I say, we're not aiming to have the best system in the world. We're aiming to have a system that is easy to use, it's intuitive, and it adds value. So what we don't want is people filling in forms or doing things because the system says. We want them to do things because they add value, they make sense, they improve health, safety and wellbeing in our business. They also must be intuitive and easy. Gone are the days when people will work through processes that are difficult and clunky. And what it means is they're investing effort into something that doesn't actually make a difference for them from a safety perspective. Critical risk management is obviously a focus, particularly with our contractors, but also on our plants. So we have a back to basics program, which we trialled with our contractor team, or we've put in place and implemented with our contractor team. It's proved very successful. So the next step is to roll that out to some of our plants. And contractors, what we know is contractors are where many of our injuries, incidents occur. And so we obviously are working closely to build partnerships and achieve outcomes with our contractors. We take a risk-based approach as opposed to a rules-based approach. So very important that we educate and engage our team, because decisions are often made at the front line. So the more we upskill our team, the more they understand what it is we're trying to achieve, the more they can make good decisions about what it is and what it is to do and how they handle a particular situation. So PPE, obviously, that last line of defence. What we're seeing at the moment is that it tends to be, or it can often be, the first control that we look at and the one that we pay most attention to. And then obviously COVID, and we're doing a lot of work. It's consuming a lot of our time from a health, safety and wellbeing perspective, as it is other areas of the business as well. And, you know, working on how we keep our team safe, importantly, because our team are critical to us being able to deliver safe water to our customers. And we have, you know, a large piece of work on around that. So happy to take questions on that. So that's the end of the presentation. But as I say, I'm really happy to take questions and discuss any of these areas.
Thanks, Bronwyn. That was really useful. And I absolutely agree that well-being, safety is an aspect of well-being. But I wonder, perhaps putting this question to you, Matt, how might we better reflect that well-being aspect in our reporting, because at the moment we're getting very much a systems improvement reporting and safety reporting, but there's the other element that we're not getting the visibility at a board level. So we thought about how we might revise, report in a more meaningful way, so that we are picking up and taking appropriate action when, and as Bronwyn has highlighted, COVID for our kaimahi, for our staff, is just will have really compounded things for them.
Yeah, no, happy to do that, Rocco, Chair, sorry, and I'll work with Bronwyn on that. So we've had a number of activities, particularly around COVID, around support of staff, engagement with staff, touching base regularly, just to give staff an opportunity to speak to somebody, because it can be quite isolating working from home in some of those aspects. So absolutely happy to include more detail around those activities we're doing. Even events where we have a total team meeting online once a week, just to make sure everybody sees other people's faces and they get to engage across the team, which to try and help people deal with some of the isolation that some of the team can be feeling. Challenges that we've had around staff that are actually in the field and having to keep physical distancing and keep those practices in place for their own protection and their whānaus while they're working in the field. And then we have the opposite effect of people who are locked at home, jealous of those people, thinking that it's great, when actually, they're actually high risk people, and having support packs and things that we've been giving them to recognise the difficulty and the additional pressure that can put on staff as they're actually in the community while COVID continues. So happy to include more detail around those type of activities.
Thanks, Matt. Garth.
Yeah, thanks. I've got 2 or 3 questions. Just start with COVID. What's Watercare's policy on COVID vaccination?
Yeah, so we are working through a consultation process at the moment. So it closed yesterday, the opportunity for consultation from our contractors and staff around going to a mandatory vaccination policy. So that mandatory vaccination would be requiring anyone who entered any of our sites to have 2 vaccinations. So the feedback from our staff has been very positive. Well, up over 80% of our staff are supportive of it. And with timelines that see us having most of our team, or a requirement for our team to have at least 1 vaccination, or visitors to site to have 1 vaccination prior to Christmas, and then the second vaccination prior to halfway through January, so when people are coming back from that Christmas leave period.
Okay, no, thanks for that. No, that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's front of mind for many of us who have frontline workers. Just going back through to some of your health and safety stuff. Do you guys, in terms of health and safety feedback from workers, do you have a worker health and safety committee who cover, obviously without management, who actually are giving feedback into the organisation in terms of what they're seeing?
Yeah, worker engagement.
Not listed in your sort of bunch of staff. So
so we do have committees for each of our operational sites, which are led by health safety representatives. So we have also elected health and safety representatives on each of our sites who participate in the committee, but we've decided to, rather than just rely on 1 or 2 representatives on each site, we also have a committee. So the feedback from those committees, the minutes are put into a shared site, so that all of the leadership layers of the business have visibility of those minutes, so they can see if there's any consistency. We review those for consistency, and any particular items that need escalation are escalated through the operations leadership team or the infrastructure leadership team or customer. Okay. Cool. So
again, it'd be really useful, I think, from a board perspective, to see some indication of how that continuous improvement program's running, because that's, I think, what it is. And just a couple of just sort of basic things. Whistleblower service, you got one of those running? Independent. So that's up. That's all good, and that's being used, I guess, I'm assuming, as part of also that stop the safety.
We do. Yeah,
And-
it's not used often, but it is
No,
used.
it's not, but it's there. And what's your policy on drug and alcohol testing?
We have random testing for anybody who is in a role that could be affected, where safety may be impacted by drug use or drug and alcohol use. We have a zero tolerance policy for any of our work sites, and we have post-incident testing, and for any of the operational roles, we have pre-employment testing as well.
The post-incident testing is one which is interesting because it's one that sort of doesn't seem to be used with us, with our workers. We've had, there's been a number of reports of safety issues and incidents which haven't been DNA tested.
Yeah, well,
So
if they haven't, they should have been.
Conversations somewhere in there around that. And does that also extend to contractors?
No, we can't impose that on contractors. We do encourage them to do that, and when it comes to an investigation, we'll ask the question, particularly if they have not done that testing.
So what we've done is just written it into their employment agreement or their contract, and when you write it into their contract, you can do it. You had a forklift tip over, things like that, no DNA test. So I'm getting some data points, which, they're at PCBU, kind of just making sure that what you're saying is also being walked out across everybody that works on our assets.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it is definitely something we can add into our contracts.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Ruku.
Thanks, Garth. David.
Yes, firstly, thanks for walking us through the policy. Pleased to read it. My question relates to how do we know that the team are buying into this strategy, this culture? Do you routinely survey the team view? Do you do culture surveys? And I'd just be interested in knowing what the trend over time is in relation to the team's view of management's commitment to safety and therefore their safety.
Yeah, that's a great question and really important. And it speaks to that Venn diagram overlap with leadership and people. So it is something that we're keeping a really close eye on. And in fact, for the first time this year, it's become one of John Lamont's KPIs, is that the culture, safety culture, particularly the relationship between leadership and people. So it is, we've recently brought on an external agency to help us to understand that picture a bit better, because we felt that we didn't, the questions that we were asking were a bit, they were a bit agricultural, I think. So we went for, we've got human synergistics involved. So there's been a significant piece of work that they've done with us, and we're rolling out now a culture improvement program, which is going to take us about 18 months, and we will have touch points along the way to keep an eye on how we're doing.
So sorry, I might have missed it. So you are surveying the team's view of their commitment to safety.
Yeah, we are actually that. We actually, funnily enough, timing wise, I actually just completed a survey on exactly this yesterday that's gone out to the entire organisation. So there's actually one currently there which includes the question around the focus on health and safety and people, how people feel that it's reflected by leadership. So yes.
And that will be measured over time to see what changes happen, because therefore give effect to some judgment around effectiveness of the approach to health and safety.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think importantly, it's not just saying, it's not just that one question. We have pulled it apart a little bit to understand more, because that helps us also to direct our actions in the right area.
Thank you.
David. Gavin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Bronwyn, I've got two questions for you. The first one is, have you, and it might lead to a third question, have you looked at the information that we receive as a board on health and safety in relation to the contract?
I don't see the board. Is there a report that comes to the board each month? I don't see that prior to it coming to you.
Okay, it comes, sorry, our, what we get from Matt as part of his report is comments around health and safety. And I guess one of the things that we've talked about is whether we're getting the right information in terms of, for us as a board, in terms of for us to really evaluate the progress around health and safety. So I guess that's really my question.
Yeah, understood. And that's a question that came to from the water care board as well to us as an organisation. So in the last 5 months, we've changed our reporting format to our board to include more of those lead indicators, wellbeing indicators, those sort of things. So if that's something that you, we would then make them specific to the Waikato District Council contract, and we can definitely do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My other question, well, it's more of a comment as much as anything, and just for the board's information as well. So as Garth alluded to, obviously the whole question around COVID and vaccine policies is very front of mind for us as well as it is for you. We did get, obviously, the outline of your policy, so I understand what your proposal has been to your staff. I guess we've also been given consideration to that in terms of how that relates to what we're doing. We're not as far advanced as you are, but we are about to start the risk assessment process for our various positions in council. But I just wanted to probably say that our thinking at the moment is that as water care is delivering as operating our plants, delivering the services from our plants, we probably, for the purposes of our COVID policy, would be considering that in fact you're operating those sites, so they are effectively your sites, your policy applies, and we have to adhere to that policy should we be visiting that site. That's kind of our thinking. Still has to be fleshed out a bit, but that's our thinking at the moment.
Yeah, maybe I can respond to that as well, Gavin. So thank you for that, because that's exactly what we were looking to get with the sharing of that information and the view from council as well. So it definitely the relationship between water care and what we do in Auckland and what we actually did in Waikato had the extra complexity of the relationship and how we would apply that. So that's really great direction. Thank you.
Garth?
Right, and just on COVID, there is another way rather than just following the sort of the process of elongated consultation. Because you're an essential service, you can actually socialise a policy for a couple of weeks and then make that policy alive. So it's what we've done here at in our network company. I'm happy to share a policy and the letter that went out to staff. It's a 2-week consultation process. It's just bang done.
Yeah, and Garth, we do appreciate that that we can do it that way. We have had feedback, so it goes to that discussion about staff engagement and feedback from staff. So we have had feedback in the past, I believe, as an organisation, that there were things that we've changed that the staff feel very disenfranchised, not so much with the outcome, but with the process of how it's done. It also occurred with Sydney Water and Vector as well, when the feedback from the process of making vaccinations mandatory was not the outcome, but more that staff really felt like they wanted to have a say. So we're hoping that by going through a consultation process in the way that we've done, we'll get better engagement with our team. So
I've got a different experience to that. So 300 staff, I've had just six that have said didn't like the process. They are all anti-vax people, but across the organisation, everybody applauded the approach. Yeah. So, I guess horses for courses, but
absolutely, yeah.
But
And I guess that's the risk we were trying to mitigate with a full consultation process.
yeah, it just depends what you think the risk is that you're introducing over that period of time. Because I'm honestly, frontline guys are not going out in my organisation unless they're double bagged. And we won't go to your premise unless the people that we're meeting with are vaccinated also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, no choice. Turn the power off, turn the water off. There's a problem, Houston. Anyway, there is an alternate. I'm happy to share it, but I mean, that's each of you to your own organisation, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garth. So, Bronwyn, just if there's no further questions, Jackie.
Kia ora. Thank you, Bronwyn, for the presentation. Just a couple of things. I guess firstly, very much supporting Gavin's comments and request for you to review the papers that are coming to our board. And I guess ensuring that the Waikato are being afforded the benefits of Watercare's sort of biggest corporate approach. I've got a couple of questions around, and maybe this is for you, Matt, I'm not sure, around what we're specifically doing to, check in and make sure that people's well-being is okay. Given how long COVID's been going on, besides, a weekly check-in, is what does best practice look like, and are we adopting that best practice? So that's my first question. My second question relates to, I guess, some specific health and safety procedures and what we are doing to protect staff, but also the community in terms of things like water connections and just physical works that are going on out there in the world.
Specifically around COVID?
Yeah,
for sure. I might jump in and just talk about Watercare as a whole, and then Matt can fill in any detail around the Waikato team specifically. So best practice, I think we've adopted a bit of an analogy about a bucket, and I talked to my team the other day to say, how is everybody? And the response was shitty and over it. So I think, that's what we're really dealing with. And so when we think about our workers, we're thinking about a bucket, and it's got a slow leak from COVID. And the truth is that slow leak is, we're really now dealing with the bottom quarter of the bucket in terms of people's resilience and, just their willingness or their energy levels and their engagement. So what we've tried to focus on is how do we keep people's buckets as full as we can, is the analogy that we've worked on. So we've had to take two quite separate processes, one for those guys who are out on site. And a lot of that, when you think about the hierarchy, is very much about the safety of themselves, their whānau, the community that they're working around. They're very conscious of that. And so our risk assessments there, we try and engage the team as much as we can about how they think that can be best done. And that's very much about adopting a lot of those hygiene, signage, separation, PPE practices out in the field. So they're really, and that's why I think having a mandatory vaccination is really helpful, because it's more of an engineering approach. So it is higher up the hierarchy of controls. So therefore it's more robust than a lot of those, mask wearing. People forget, they take it off to have a drink, forget to put it back on, that sort of stuff. So some of those admin and PPE controls are less consistent. The same with the distancing. Guys will work 2 meters apart, but then as they go through that task, they find themselves next to each other. And so, those controls are not as effective as they could, as others, which are around isolation or substitution. So for isolation, Matt will probably talk better than I can about how the A and B split is working in the Waikato, but it's been very important and very effective for us. The challenge that we have with it is that fatigue is setting in. So this is something we are really conscious with the team out in the field. Fatigue is setting in with the change in the way shifts are split up. So that's why we're really hoping to come to be able to use some other controls so that we can get back to less of a you know, a less of a skeleton or a less of a reduced number of workers on site at any one time, but higher intensity type approach. For our team at home, that's actually really challenging because they have a different profile in terms of risk or in terms of stresses. Things like family that you're trying to, you know, you're trying to get schoolwork done, and you're trying to manage a work environment that isn't always private and isn't always quiet. And, you know, the teams meetings, which are constantly coming and you don't get anything done in between. So with our team at home, we've engaged Umbrella, which is an organisation that provides support and training. So we've got them supporting us to run some sessions, and we also have specific wellbeing workshops set up based around the 5 ways of wellbeing. So we've adopted the Mental Health Foundation approach, which is aligned with Te Whare Tapawha, which was where we're saying, you know, your family is important, your home is important. You know, how do you balance all of that and make that work for you? So it is a lot about leaders engaging with their teams, because everyone has an individual environment that they're trying to manage. And Matt will talk some more about that, how that's happening with his team, but very much about leader engagement with individuals, I think is probably the key, and providing lots and lots of options for our team and lots of ideas. You know, about using leave a little bit differently. Take 1 day's leave for next week, but what it means is every day you can have a sleep in for an hour and a half every morning, or, you know, things like that, or break up your work day, take 2 hours off in the middle of every day. We've got a huge leave liability, so it's ways of people using up leave to give themselves a break and structure their days more effectively, I think. Yeah, so it's not easy. We haven't got it perfect, but that's, I guess, the approach that we're trying to take.
Yeah, I think just building on that, thanks, Bronwyn, that was great. I think the initial view of it was to have an overview approach to ensure that we were communicating with the whole team regularly, and from that then identified individuals that might be struggling more than others, and then what we've done is focused on those individuals and how we can support them. Bronwyn talked before about whānau at home and children, and children at home has been a real challenge for people that doing the homeschool studying and all those activities has really put quite a lot of pressure on the team, as well as I've got to do 8 hours work as well. And so really working with the team around that, working out, so, you know, being flexible on when they work and how they work, and really looking at what can work for individuals has been key to helping everybody get through. I mean, as Bronwyn said, everyone's just over it, I think is the easiest way to describe it. I think one of the challenges with the field crews is we've actually created a full web page online with a huge amount of information and education for people who read it. For the guys in the field, that probably isn't as useful, and so we've had to do kind of refreshers even around the aspect of there is no risk from wastewater, because we talk about wastewater testing quite regularly, and so it leads people down different paths. And so we're having to remind and refresh the team that, especially in the Waikato, because Auckland's kind of been continually in this, and Waikato's kind of bounced in and out as we've gone along, and it's meant we've had to refresh and remind the crews of some of those key actions and kind of education, so that that doesn't raise additional concerns for them. But even that, getting the whole team together and giving everybody an opportunity to say something, sometimes that's great, but sometimes they don't want to do it in that environment, so they engage directly with their managers, and really just making sure we've got those channels of communication for people to come back and say, either I'm struggling, I need more information, I'm not comfortable with something. And the mandate approach was a great example of that, of really just giving everybody an opportunity to voice concerns. You know, whereas, as Bronwyn said, the majority of people said, I'm double vaxxed and I'm fine. It's not really those people we're probably as concerned about, but still giving them an opportunity to have a voice, because even those people have a view on mandate, not really on vaccination, but on the impact on your role and your job. So overall, I think best practice is a really hard word when it comes to COVID, because everybody's learning and growing, and we are adjusting and trying to be as agile as we can around specifically wellness and people and what we have to do. But again, like I said, I think that overview of how's everybody doing, with then really tailored kind of individual focus on people who are struggling, and there have been some who have, across every organisation, I'm sure, and really just making sure we're supporting them as much as we can. I don't know if that's enough detail, Jackie, or happy to talk in more.
Kia ora, Matt. Kia ora, Bronwyn. I guess just noting the comment you made, Matt, around your operating team sort of working 24/7 and wanting to make sure that Watercare have got, steps in place to relieve some of those individuals from that pressure, given that fatigue will be setting in. And maybe just a suggestion, I'm hugely thankful to the operating team and everyone working on the water business. If as a board we can, express that, because it is a really tough time for everybody, just to, I guess, let them know that we recognise the work that they're doing on behalf of everyone in the Waikato district. Kia ora.
Kia ora, that's, very cool.
Awesome, Jackie. And to that point, Matt, if you do get the team together, even if it's on a Zoom, I'm happy to come in for a minute or so just to express our gratitude on behalf of the board. A letter can help, but I think being able to communicate it face to face or even virtually, something for you to consider. But that, a great discussion. Appreciate it is a pretty, as you said, Bronwyn, the risk profile is different depending on the role, and acknowledge that you are looking at many different ways as to how we can support our staff. And it is important for us to get a sense of that in the monthly reporting. So just coming back to Jackie's point, we will look forward to receiving kind of enhancements to the existing health and safety reporting, Matt. So if Bronwyn could, supplement what you're reporting with a much deeper dive around some of the lead indicators and wellbeing indicators and so on, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. I think that's the key outcome from that discussion. If there's nothing else, or no further questions to Bronwyn on health and safety, and so just to flag Bronwyn the offer there from Garth, we want.
Thank you. Yep.
Look at that, and also it's important, which I'm assuming you're doing anyway, given your team and Bronwyn's team working closely around the policy, what that policy looks like around COVID and the vaccination rollout, or position at least. Okay, so where are we at? So, can I then, so we'll bring that discussion to an end unless there's anything further.
No, that's great, and thanks to Bronwyn and Paula for attending. Really appreciate it, and they probably will step away. I know they've got other meetings today, so but no, thank you. And Madam Chair, you really appreciate the offer for attending a meeting with the staff. I think that would be great. I'll certainly arrange that.
Right, so can I have somebody move and second the Three Waters Governance Report? Thanks, Given. Second, Garth. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, we will now move to the Te Kaupapa Wastewater Treatment Plant update.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Right. Thanks for the opportunity to update on Te Kaupapa Wastewater Treatment Plant. This is an update on the presentation that I gave in July, just to show the progress that we've made in the last 3 months. We'll start with probably the bad news, that the operational compliance hasn't improved over the last 3 months, and that's mainly because none of the new works have come online yet. So this plant's still tracking along as normal. From a construction point of view at Te Kaupapa, we have made significant progress on the plant upgrade, the phase 1 UV disinfection, which is the DIA funded work. The contractor's on site, all the key equipment's been received. There have been some key COVID related delays, but we've generally, apart from level 3 working conditions, most of them have been resolved in the last week or so. Site supervision has been challenging. Watercare was going to supervise these works ourselves, but we've actually got a consultant doing it just because of our supervisor living in Pukekohe. And on a positive note, the pump station was installed last week. So it's on to installing the concrete pad in the actual UV units now. So that's on track to be still finished in February after commissioning. The MABR is also, which is phase 2, is also making good progress. The stainless steel has arrived in Auckland from Melbourne, which was a key risk, especially because I think there's some strikes coming up at the Melbourne port next few weeks. The screens have been ordered, and as far as we know, they're due to arrive in December. However, potentially that could slip out to January. The design's complete, and the expected costs are firming up. And we've commenced power supply upgrade. And in the PEX session this afternoon, there's the final upgrade for the compliance upgrade, which is the UV Kpis, which I'll talk to this afternoon. The ultimate upgrade, which is to deal with populations over the next 50 years in growth, has pre-concept design has been developed and costed, and it's sized for the current 50-year growth forecast. We had 3 options determined during this. One was a pure bioform, so a pure MABR plant, and then 2 hybrid options of a hybrid MABR with activated sludge and mixed liquor suspended solids activated sludge hybrid as well. Probably the key driver for cost was effectively the area that we had to reclaim in the wetlands. So the second option was the most expensive because it had the biggest area to be reclaimed. All 3 options came in above the budget that's available for the ultimate upgrade in the AMP. There's a few reasons why this has happened. The growth estimates are actually a lot higher than were in place for the HIF upgrade 6 years ago. And also there's been a lot of cost escalation in the last few years. So we're going to do some more work to investigate how we can reduce costs, which could be staging due to growth, looking at some sort of centralised sludge handling, which will reduce the footprint, and also just recognise the cost escalations over the last few years. So that hopefully we'll have worked through that over the next few months, and that will be presented to the board probably early next year, the finalised costings in February or March, maybe. The MABR trial at Mangere is working well. It's been going now for a couple of months, and there's been quite a lot of troubleshooting and problem solving over the last month, but the process is now running well, and this will be vital when we come to commission the TK plant in April 2022 at this stage. It's also confirmed that although ammonia and nutrient removal is expected, that the suspended solids removal was also as expected, which means we will need ultrafiltration to remove the suspended solid to the consent condition. The trial was basically just to see if we were there was a potential that we could get more suspended solids removal in the MABR process than expected, but it hasn't come to pass. It's a picture of the trial unit at Mangere in the Innovation Centre. The other part of the TK project at the moment that we're sort of kicking off to some extent is the reconsenting, which will effectively be driven by growth, because the plant will exceed its dry weather capacity in 2 or 3 years' time. So we've developed some objectives for the consenting program, which you can read on the screen there, and it was in the pack, which will drive the options assessment and the analysis of where the ultimate discharge will be located. These are still a little bit of a work in progress as we refine them, but that's the objectives that we've got at present. And we've sort of refined the discharge options that we had in July to 4 discharge options, which will be, each of which will be investigated in detail. So a few larger options, such as pumping to Pukekohe or pumping back to Puketi, have been discarded, but these are we think these are the 4 viable options to further investigate. And as in the pack, and I won't go through all of these, we're currently costing a set of investigations for each of the 4 options to get some baseline data together, so that we can start to undertake long list assessment, long list analysis in MCA, and also have some more information to commence the stakeholder consultation process in detail. So therefore, the continued discharge to Lake Waikere, discharge to the new discharge to the Waikato River, which will be the most challenging. Discharge to land, and probably the challenge with the discharge to land is the fact that it's probably only going to be a seasonal discharge to land that will be possible in this area due to the type of soils around Te Kauwhata, which means there will need to be some continued discharge to either the lake or the river in winter period, or the reuse, and potentially coupled with reuse of treated wastewater. And we've identified a few industries and users that we could further investigate this with, but we need to be a little bit more along the track before we do this in detail. And also we'll need to engage a property consultant to look for potential for irrigation outside of the Te Kauwhata Irrigation Society. So that's a quick update of what's happening at Te Kauwhata. I'll stop sharing now. So if anyone's got any questions, happy to hear the questions.
Questions for Sharon? Becky. Okay.
Well, kia ora, Sharon. A couple of questions from me. The first question relates to reclamation of the wetland areas at the plant, and whether we've tested that with the regional council, given what appears to be emerging in terms of compliance with the MPS freshwater and impacting any type of wetland.
We've had some initial conversations with the regional council. The wetland is actually, it's not a natural wetland that we're planning to, it's an engineered wetland that was built at the time of the plant. So it is slightly different. It's in very poor condition at the moment as well. So we have had some initial conversations, but that's part of the next step of the process. Once we choose an option, we'll do that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I guess I'd suggest trying to bottom that out soon, just so you know what you're working with.
We do have a secondary but probably more expensive option to reclaim Pond 2 if the wetland's not possible, which I think would have less issues, but obviously more expensive. So yeah, take your point that we need to discuss that with the regional council sooner rather than later.
And I just wanted to flag probably to the board, because I'm sure Sharon and others are aware, that for the sub-regional Three Waters mahi that's been delivered through Futureproof, Te Kauwhata will be a case study looking at, I guess, how we might give effect to a different way of managing water services. So Lutra, who are undertaking the design work, are also engaged to look at water and wastewater servicing for the sub-regional work. And Roger, this is sort of the point I was trying to make last meeting, is I think it's really important that we are, the messaging and the objectives between that strategic sub-regional piece and project-specific activities are aligned. It's happening all over the sub-region, so it's not just Te Kauwhata, but I think there's a risk of really confusing people and not using engagement opportunities to, I guess, just draw those lines for stakeholders. So I just wanted to raise that and flag that with the board. And my final question was really in relation to the discharge options, and whether you've looked at what Palmerston North decision has been, and what sort of combinations of options you might be looking at, or if that's maybe a bit early in the piece. Thanks.
I am aware of the Palmerston North decision. It was a very interesting decision. But yes, we are, and it's most likely we'll end up with a hybrid solution at Te Kauwhara of some sort, which is why we're probably looking at reuse, irrigation, and a pure land discharge. And because of the specific conditions in Te Kauwhara, it'll likely have to be a three-pronged approach to get a discharge that's not to the either to the Awa or to the lake. Yeah,
Kia ora,
so
Sharon.
it's a work in progress at the moment.
And sorry, one final question. That's in relation to the changes in density that are being proposed through various policies, and whether those have been reflected in the population assumptions.
They have, and that's why the costs are a little bit more, because it's a much bigger plant than was probably imagined at the HIF stage. Yes, so yes is the answer to that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Gavin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Sharon, just are we still confident that we'll meet the deadlines we set with the Regional Council?
Yes, I say that. The only nervousness I have is with the ultrafiltration unit, that we really need to order that in maybe January, February at the latest, just to get over the shipping times. We've had some discussion with Suez, and that's for the suspended solids, which is a Kpis this afternoon.
Yep.
Because that's 3 months in the factory, and they're estimating a 6-month shipping period at the moment. So that's going to be towards the end, but all things going well, we believe we can do it. But that being said, we'll be there or thereabouts by the end of the year. The nitrogen, the phosphorus, the E. coli will all be compliant by the end of the year. All of that is in train at the moment. End of next year, sorry, not end of this year.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. I've got two more questions. So along the same lines, are we confident we'll, and I know there's been an extension, are we confident we will utilise the funding we got from DIA?
Yes, that's the UV.
Right.
That'll be finished by February.
Okay.
And that's we've got everything for the UV now. We had some issues with timber piles, which has been resolved. So yeah, I don't think that'll be further delayed, unless of course we have another level 4 lockdown and the contract has to stop. But other than that, we're on track for that one.
Okay, and my last question. So when we talked about, because the stuff you've shared around the trial going on at Mangere, obviously is encouraging, really encouraging. Has that, because I know we talked at one stage about the trial incorporating some of the Te Kauwhata wastewater to make sure it was, I don't know, whatever the technical terms are, but to make sure it was going to be fit for purpose. Has that happened yet, or is that still to happen?
And we probably won't do that. We don't believe it's required. We've done some testing of what we're doing at Mangere, which is a slightly more industrial trade waste dominated wastewater. But effectively, that's just going to make the MABR plant work a little bit harder. So we're confident that we don't believe we need to use the Te Kauwhara specific wastewater, which is very residential, and we can predict quite well what the performance will be.
Okay, thanks, Sharon.
David.
Yes, Sharon, look, thanks, appreciate that presentation. Just one question from me. With regard to working through the options, the discharge options, what's the plans for consultation with mana whenua around, with what I'm hearing is you'll be looking for an engineering solution. So what's your plans for consultation with mana whenua around their preference for options?
Or as in the 4 options, each of the options had, apart from maybe the reuse option at the end, part of the investigations, and we are calling them investigations or minor projects to be undertaken, will be working with mana whenua to develop strategies for each of the 3 options, which will be developing, I think I said it in the slide, the cultural significance of each of the discharge options and what mana whenua expectations will be, either for the 3 land, lake and river. So that's going to kick off with the rest of the investigations as well. That will we'll try to develop a team to work through this together.
Will they have an option to work through as you start to scope, or simply be presented with the pluses and minuses of each of the respective?
No, they'll be there at the beginning when we kick this off in a few weeks' time with the investigation stage. At the moment, it's very high level, just setting objectives, but we are moving down to the secondary level now of working through what the actual discharge options will look like. And we have, to date, we have had some discussions with mana whenua over potential discharge options. So it'll just be continuing on that work.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? Garth? No? Great. Thank you for that update, Sharon.
Great.
I had nothing further to add. It was just to David's point there. I know in your presentation that the consenting objectives, which are outlined in your document, will actually drive the preferred option. So that will obviously be in consultation with mana whenua and other key stakeholders. So yep. Thank you for the update. And let's hope that the shipping somehow miraculously that shipping period is reduced. But no, it's great to see that the plant upgrades are progressing largely as planned. I think there's nothing further, so we will receive, the recommendation is to receive the report on the Te Kaupata Wastewater Treatment Plant update. Move Gavin, second David. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. Now we move to the mana whenua forums paper. Let me just pull that up. Gavin, are you going to introduce this, or is this for Sam to speak to?
Madam Chair, I'll just let Sam go through this.
Okay. Hang on, I've got to try and put this back on. Oh, hang on. Oh, I had it all set and I had practiced it and I practiced it and now it's not working properly. Oh, man. Hang on. Hang on. Oh, man.
Hate to apply.
What's that one? Okay. Oh, yeah, I got it. Sort of. Okay. Oh, kia ora tātou. I hope you've all read the report.
Yeah.
I can't, oh, here it is. I got it. Yeah. Resume share. Can you guys see that? Hey?
Yes, now we can, yes.
Oh, sure. So, Waikato District Council approved to establish mana whenua forums. And the presentation given to the council was to see how it may look like. And so the mana whenua forums presented to the council was presented like this, to be broken into north, south, east, and west. And so when we look at the north, because it's a vast area, it was broken into 3 parts, from Tuakau to Port Waikato, Mere Mercer, Mangatangi, Pokeno, and Rangariri to Kaupata, Hampton Downs and the surrounding districts. Now the good thing about it is that the water care and different businesses will continue to speak with the same people. So it won't affect who you'll be speaking to. Now, when we look at the south section, you have, hang on, I've got to move this out the way. You have Ohinawai, Arahi, Pōkeka, Huntley. And when you look at that cluster or that section, it more or less is Ngamuka Development Trust, along with Matahuru, Marae, Te Rewa, Waikato, and so forth. And so when you look to the southern part of that district, you've got Taupiri and Ngarua Wahia. And those are the mana whenua groups that you need to speak with. So for the east is easy. You've got Tamahere, Eureka, which is more or less the same area, Tauwhare and Gordonton. So those are groups that they're all sort of related and easy to talk to. And no doubt you would have spoken to them. But when you look at the next one, the west, now that's a big area. And it's broken into two sections, which is Te Kōwhai and Whatawhata. And then you go down to Waingaro, Whangaroa, Raglan, Te Ako, surrounding districts, which brings in more Tako and the rural areas way out there. There's all bush people. Even though it's a vast area, they're all the same whānau, but with different areas to speak to. Okay, so that's what the mana whenua forums look like. Council met again. You would have seen in the report about remuneration, and council met again. Kevin, can I ask you to talk to that one? About remuneration, all that stuff.
Yep. So look, what we wanted to do, one of the questions obviously was how did we remunerate or reimburse members of the forums? So I took a report to council last month. We've allocated a sum of, or council has allocated a sum of $50,000 so we can get the forums underway. And then obviously we'll have to assess whether that is sufficient funding to get this started. But it's very much around just getting the process started and underway. So that's pretty much what I want to cover. We did have some discussion at the last JMA meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, and I've been requested to come up with some terms of reference for the mana whenua forums, but effectively they are intended to provide good foundations to our relationships with Maori at a local level, and meaning that when we do have particular projects that are coming up, we already have good relationships in place, so we can have sometimes what can be challenging conversations. So that's the kind of, if you've got the good foundations, it's going to make things easier when you have to have challenging conversations, I guess is probably my sort of summary of it. Sam?
Yeah, so we have a list of chairs from the various maraes within the district. We have a list of chairs of trustees on those particular marae. And so what I've asked my team to do is to call those respective maraes and draft up a letter, have them send a letter to say, when speaking to anyone, this is the person, this is the mandated person you need to talk to. So we already have 4 in place that we know that they are mandated people to speak to on the marae behalf, and so forth. And this list is updated every 3 months because we don't know when the marae chairs change chairship and all that type of stuff. So that's why it's updated every 3 months. And so that's the best we can do, and that's my report, Madam Chair.
Kapai. thank you, and acknowledge the space that you work in, Matua Sam. It is not easy to navigate so many interest groups, mana whenua interest groups, and particularly where there's overlap. But I think that the progress you've made, and I acknowledge it's your leadership and your style that actually brings people to the table in a safe way. So I think what we have before us, acknowledge your last comment there around continuously confirming who has mandate on behalf of each of these entities, which will help Watercare and Council to know that they are dealing with the right people, particularly in when we look at the projects we have before us, including Te Kauwhata right at the minute. So with that is an acknowledge too that perhaps, or actually maybe this is a clarification I'm seeking. Is Waikato Tainui are they holding the relationship, or in terms of the request to you to pull together terms of reference? How does what's my question? Who holds the relationship? Are we? I'm assuming we are the council. It's directly with each of these groups, or is it with Waikato Tainui and they will liaise with the respective groups?
Waikato District Council has the is leading this for this particular role, and especially when it comes to various projects for the council. However, under the JMA, we are working together with Waikato Tainui, and our relationship is starting to build and get stronger with them, and we're sharing out all this information with them. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Just before I hand it over to you to ask your question, Jackie. So I think what would be helpful is given as to, it's one thing to have the terms of reference, but we almost need to populate or at least provide a calendar of projects and key timings so that they are aware of what matters we are dealing with, and then they can consider themselves how they will meaningfully engage. So, for example, Te Kauwhata, we've got some key timelines there. If we could have that for all projects that relate to each of these mana whenua groups, I think that will allow them to come to the table in a way that they can get feedback from their constituency as opposed to receiving the information on the day and having to go backwards and forwards. So just put that there for your consideration. Jackie.
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora, Uncle Sam. So just for disclosure, Sam is my uncle. My son just saw him and said, "Kia ora, Sam." Really happy to see that this is progressing. I guess I'm keen to put some timeframes on it being concluded and some initial hui being set up. So I wonder, in terms of reference, and Uncle Sam, you've probably already spoken to Muna, but Hamilton City Council have ngā whā whakatupu ake as a similar type forum. So they've got terms of reference and I guess a system that appears to be working well within the Hamilton metro area, which might be worth sort of leaning on rather than starting from scratch. Just a suggestion, like I think it would be really useful to send a pānui to all of the marae and the various groups, just in writing, just to let them know what's happening and what the proposal is. And I guess that's probably going to get covered off in the pānui that your team are preparing, Uncle, for nominating a representative. So I guess just really encourage that to happen as soon as possible. And then the final comment I just want to make is in relation to the budget that's been allocated. And I guess my assumption is that engagement required to deliver projects, which will be, I guess, jumping into a level of detail that I wouldn't imagine you'd get to in an all-in sort of touch base sort of hui that the mana whenua forum will provide, that engagement will be budgeted for within the project budgets, as opposed to the funding allocation that council have made available. And I think it'd be worth Gavin looking at what Peter Winder's doing for Ngā Karu Ato Te Waka in terms of appropriate REM, just to respect the contribution that mana whenua make to the work that council do, and how that's being funded. So it's sort of like for like. So just a couple of suggestions there, but really happy to see this progressing and keen to see some dates put on the actions to round it off and get the forum up and running. Kia ora.
Thanks, Jackie. David, did you?
Sam, do you want to respond to Jackie?
Yeah,
or-
if you don't mind, in regards to speaking with Muna at the Hamilton City Council, when we looked at this proposal for remuneration, we looked both at Hamilton City Council, how they were doing it, and Tauranga City Council. And it was from those examples that we used to see if we can navigate through this process, and it's still being continued. So, and I'll get onto that. Maybe you can draft a letter up, Jackie, and send it to us.
So,
got a good thing?
Madam Chair, if I can just pick up from what Sam said. So when I've said I've got to write some terms of reference, I'm not expecting to be writing them without referring to the documents we've already got from Hamilton City and from Tauranga as guidance to help me. I think the second part of your question, Jackie, is I don't see what we're talking about as a substitute for specific project engagement that we undertake with the mana whenua forums. Yes, I've just seen the forums and the funding there to be specific for to get some regular contact engagement going before we, without really being any substitute for specific engagement we have around specific projects. And again, I have seen within both the Hamilton City, I think it's an MOU with Hamilton City, and the one from Tauranga as well, the approach that they've taken around these matters.
Good, Gavin.
David.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Sam, let's applaud the progress that's being made. Great to see it happening. So just help me in my understanding with or just check with what the previous agenda item we were talking about regard to the discharge options for Te Kauwhata. Is it therefore now the intent that those options will be discussed with the North group, and that will be the forum by which we receive now the mana whenua views? So that's the first question, and therefore, which follows from that, will those views be filtered and consolidated by water care services, or in fact come through to this group to be balanced alongside what the engineering advice might be?
Who answers that? Me?
I'm happy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Someone else does.
I think Gavin just answered that question, David.
Oh, sorry, I might have missed that. So can Gavin repeat that?
Sorry, David, can you just ask your question again so I make sure I'm answering the right thing?
Maybe I'm confused here. I was just tracking back to the previous conversation around discharge options for Te Kauwhata, and I'm just checking that in fact now the mana whenua consultation will happen through the North group, and that the view will be formed there and come through either to the water care services for consolidation, or will it come therefore then through to this group to be balanced alongside the engineering options? How's the process going to work in practice?
So So we'll have in place the forums, which we will be able to have discussions around issues of mutual interest. When we have specific projects, then we will have to deal with those as separate issues anyway. So if I think about Te Kaiwhata as an example, we already have the consultation group that we've been working with, that includes mana whenua, forest and bird, and various other groups as well. So at this stage, we're still working with that group, and we'll continue to work with that group, I would think.
Okay.
To David's point, because I think that's a good example, David, just how is this policy going to work in practice? So I think David's right, though, in the first instance, that it's the mana whenua from the North group that would be, that are involved with the wastewater treatment plant at Te Kaiwhata. Is that correct?
See, nothing's changed. The only thing that has changed is the name, Mana Whenua Forum, but you're still in front of the people that you are speaking to at this time, at this moment.
Yeah.
So all it is just giving clarification that the North is broken up into these sections, and when it comes to TK, this is who you talk to. So that's what it's all about, David. Yeah.
No,
does it?
And then just to build on that again, and so when Watercare engages for Te Kaiwhata on the discharge options, then they should be giving an allocation or include in their budgets an allocation for this level of engagement or consultation with mana whenua, with that mana whenua group, to pick up on Jackie's point, that's the practical implementation of this proposal as I understand it.
The way I've seen it play out in practice, Ruku, is these sorts of forum, because it's for all of council business, not just water related business, and there'll be so much going on that'll be an opportunity to inform more than really get into a deep dive on any particular subject. But it's a way of, I guess, regularly touching base, sharing information, and getting initial feedback so that more in-depth kōrero can happen as that group sees fit.
That's helpful. I guess what I don't want to see, which can often happen, and again, I think we spoke about this at the start of the meeting, the landscape, I think, is ripe for confusion in terms of the what's happening with the name escapes me, the work that you're leading, Jackie, then the projects that we have. So it's these forums need to be set up and structured in a way that allows all the bits to kind of come together in a coordinated way, so that we're not having meetings for the sake of having meetings. Not suggesting that will happen, but it's how do we, because it's one thing to have the forum, but how do we ensure that it's meaningful for us and for them to I think that's my only, that there's a risk with so much happening in this water space, and given that the forum is it exists for all kaupapa, not just water, it needs to be structured in a way that that is meaningful and avoids duplication, confusion, and the like. So appreciate that's, well, I think we just got to set it up first and then make sure that the way it's structured is carefully considered. Otherwise, I think we risk further confusing this whole landscape.
Oh, you're right, Ruku. Like, there is so much going on, and I think just looking at the future-proof boundaryless approach, it is really important that the various councils work together, particularly in the water space, which I'm as you know, largely most interested in, so that we are having joined up conversations. So that's something I think that the council staff and probably Watercare need to just have a sit down and think about how how to design that in a more effective way.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. So with that, are you comfortable with that, Gavin and Sam? I think the design going forward is important, but let's get it up and running, which has been. I think we're just going to formalise it as I understand it.
Sorry, Rooker, can someone at some stage just give us this? Sorry, the structure of how all these forums come together. Because I mean, your point is the thing that I think it's a great idea, and I know how much work has gone into this. I really applaud the work, Sam, but I don't understand how all the layers of communication work across. I mean, this isn't just water. This is across all sort of things that need to be discussed in our community. But how does it all fit up? And then, of course, across the top of that is the Three Waters review as well. So I don't kind of get a sense of how all these meetings fit, if that makes sense, or how these groups fit. They're all the same people, but I'm a little confused. So, I mean, I think that the engagement is absolutely necessary, but what is even if you just kind of got a sense of the agenda or the scope of each group, I don't know, but I think we run the risk as a community of just, like you said, confusing everybody. So, because if you think about it, you know, just in water, so there's Waikato District, Hamilton, and Waipa, then you've got, in terms of their own water issues, then you've got the work that Jackie's doing with Metro Wastewater, then you've got the individual component pieces like Waikiri, which is sort of sitting there, which David's talked about, and then we've got the whole consultation process, which is running across Three Waters, right?
Yeah.
And each one of those groups can have a different perspective and a different conversation running, which may or may not, you know, be congruent. I don't understand how it fits personally. That's all.
Yeah. So I think, and I don't know, Sam, it's probably a bit unfair to put this on you because this was you were tasked with a piece of work and that's been achieved. But over the months, particularly as Three Waters and the RMA reform has come to light, the complexity now is greater than when we first set out, I think, to establish the forum. So Gavin, perhaps that's something we could just leave with you to support the team on how do we ensure that the design reflects all these moving parts so that we are using our time in terms of engaging with mana whenua, because everybody is saying the same thing. That is critical, and we're not trying to avoid that. But how do we do it in a way that is meaningful given everything that's going on at the moment? If I'm not sure, I think it's somewhat, is there something that your team can pick up in terms of how that's designed to take all that into account? And I think it's, it obviously is working with Waikato Tainui and these groups.
Look, Madam Chair, I respect what everyone's saying. I guess I think we actually have to put our toe in the water and make a start, because it's not going to be perfect. But what we know as a council is that we've dropped the ball in the past. We haven't had good relationships with mana whenua, and that has been when we've come to critical projects, we've had to start from scratch and build relationships that should have been in place. So for me, the main thing is to get things underway first, to start to build those relationships or rebuild those relationships so that when we do come to the critical challenges, mana whenua know who they're talking to and we know who we're talking to. And I think that's it. Jackie kind of summed it up before and said, you know, the forums will fundamentally provide, as I see it, those foundations. And then when we want to talk about Te Kauwhata wastewater, we'll have a sidebar on that with, and then if we want to talk about Raglan wastewater, we'll have a sidebar on that. When we want to talk about something else, a specific project, we might have a different conversation around that.
Okay. I know, yeah, and I don't think any of us are saying don't start with what we've got. I think that's urgent. Probably what, to Jackie's point, when will that start? That's the hopefully this side of Christmas, but maybe it's an agenda item to that meeting to explain there is a lot of work happening across many different sectors. How do you want us to engage with you on that? That might be the beginning of the kind of design process, but we're doing it together. Cool.
Madam Chair, if I may, to you, Grant, it's a simple process. When you look at all of the marae and Māori groups within the Waikato district area, we all come under one common thing, which is the kingitanga. We also come under Waikato Tainui, and then you need to look, you need to give me a call so I can show you how it works. And you've got to see all the different layers. You see on top is the boss, which is the king movement, and then it filters down. So you see how, hey, Grant, you got a grandson? Well, when you get your grandson, you got to start with, okay, who's the head of the family that's still alive? Could be a great grandparent or so forth, and then you work your way down the layers. That's how it is within these groups. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Awesome. Right. Well, we will move to receive that the Mana Whenua report. Can I have somebody move and second, please? Thanks, Garth. Second, Gavin. All those in favour, ki mai aye. Against, carried. Garth, you might be a grandfather sooner than you realise. I'm sure you would like that. Okay. And thank you, Matua Sam, for the report and for the mahi that you do. Right, moving to the resource consent status overview. Is that you, Carol?
Yes, I can talk to that. Thank you. So this paper was to give the board an update. We last did a paper like this, I think, in July last year. So it is giving a summary of the resource consent statuses based on the Waikato Regional Council assessment of the 1920 year that they carry out assessments during 2021, and the changes and what we've got planned for the different area consents. So in the table on page 58, that just shows the 7 water treatment plants and the 9 wastewater treatment plants. The water take consents are looking either all fully compliant or close to fully compliant. The wastewater is where we have some issues. There's 2 that have got abatement notices and 3 that have formal warnings. The abatement notices, I think we've discussed those already in different reports, so you are well aware of those for Miri and Te Kowhara for wastewater, and of course we have that one outstanding item on the Raglan stormwater consent around Cambrai Road. So focusing on the formal warnings, ones that we've got, we have now received a formal warning in place for Huntly, Raglan and Ngarawahia. We have all 3 water treatment plants will require an upgrade before all the non-compliances can be fully resolved, and we do have money budgeted in our LTP in the outer years to do the upgrades. There are small improvements being made where we can along the way. We've got the desludging that's completed Huntly and is commenced at Ngarawahia, which will help improve the performance, but again not resolve our current non-compliances in full. So looking at the 3 different ones, Raglan, there's a presentation coming up a little bit later about the land, the consent and land options, and whatever we end up with for the resource consent renewal will have an impact on what the upgrade to the plant is. Ngarawahia upgrade, that's not budgeted out till 2029 to year 31 in our LTP. One of the options for Ngarawahia is looking at the project that Jackie's leading on whether we end up pumping that to the Pukeri plant as opposed to upgrading the Ngarawahia wastewater treatment plant. The Huntly plant, Sharon and I have done some work in that space on a concept upgrade plan, but it's largely on hold until the funding becomes available in the LTP in the outer years, and that is forecast for 25 to 28 financial years. We've got 47 million in there. We particularly wanted to bring the Huntly plant to the board's attention for discussion on whether it's something you would like us to look at bringing forward, and more pressure will obviously come on Huntly if the Haniwai development goes ahead. Then the attachment at the end that just gives you a little bit more detail about each of the consents, what has been done, what is looking at being done as well. That's the summary really, and open it up for questions.
Kevin.
So, Madam Chair, it's more of a comment than a question, because Carol and I have been talking about this, and she just raised it. It is the upgrade of Huntly, bringing that forward, which means we actually need to go back to council and request that the funding be brought forward. Carol, I'm correct, and maybe Linda's may be able to answer this, but my understanding is we could do that without breaching our cap, our debt ceiling cap. We have, just to probably give you a bit more background, so we're working our way through the appeals. If we don't reach conclusion on the appeals within the next month, or probably 6 weeks, then we will be back to the Environment Court for mediation. But good progress is being made, I think, is where I'd put that. We applied to the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund for funding to support the upgrade of Huntly, which would not only enable, well, it would serve 3 purposes, I think, at the moment. Firstly, it would enable and support the Sleepyhead project. Secondly, it would support some work which Kainga is proposing to do within Huntly around building some new houses, 600 new houses, I believe. And thirdly, it would also address compliance issues that we're going to have. If we haven't got them now, we're going to have them in Huntly, so it would enable us to get on top of that much sooner than we anticipated as well. So I guess really, Ruku, what I was hoping to get from the board was some sort of agreement around generally that we look to bring Huntly forward, or at least approach the council about bringing the funding forward to enable us to make some progress on this.
Thanks, Kevin. Comments, questions from other directors? So the paper is seeking our guidance around bringing forward the upgrade of Huntly. We've seen in the 3-month Water Governance report that the issues that we're dealing with at Huntly, as Gavin has alluded to. David, your hand is up.
Very simple, happy to support and prepared to move.
Thank you. Jackie?
You're muted, Jackie. Sorry.
So your hand was up, or do you?
Sorry. Had to do it once in the meeting. I've got a couple of questions. The first I should have raised in the water care operations report, but I did note that the desludging operation that happened at Huntly only removed a quarter of the sludge within the ponds. Was there a reason for that besides, I guess, budget? And should we be looking to remove more than that to improve, I guess, its current performance?
Do you want to speak to that, Carol? Yes, it's budget. As was dislodging, you could keep going as long as you can afford to. Would you come back and look at it? I think it will depend on the plant upgrade and really the timing on what happens as to whether you'd need to continue doing more dislodging. But if the funding was there, it's always a practical way to manage the ponds and reduce the impact.
Yeah, I guess for me, you know, given that we've got formal warnings on that discharge, it would seem to me that we should be making investment to reduce the consequences or the scale of that breach. And moving forward, any proposed upgrades is not going to happen overnight. So yeah, just really keen for, I guess, advice from staff around what measures can we be putting in place to address the non-compliance, particularly on the river plants. I think there's a great amount of effort put in to Raglan or Whangaroa, and you know, doing what we can there, and really keen to see the same level of, I guess, effort and investment put on the river plants. So I guess just something that I'm really keen to get some advice on from the team, just to make it, I guess, clear that we're doing everything that we can to address current performance issues.
Yeah, happy to progress that conversation. I think we do have to be cautious that the desludging doesn't always address the issues that we're trying to resolve. And Huntly, I believe, is an example of that, where in fact we can actually make the compliance issues a little bit worse. And really the plant option is, I think, the primary one, but Sharon will, may have a bit more background on that, having looked at it.
Yeah, we did. I would I agree with what Matt said, but potentially we could desludge a little bit more. There is some interim options that could bring the plant back into compliance, such as the MBBR, which would be about a $4 or $5 million investment, but could be installed relatively quickly. So but even that's arguably funding that we don't have at the moment, but we could provide a more detailed assessment of interim options to bring the plant back into compliance. The other thing about some of those interim options that we've investigated to date for Huntly is they don't particularly deal with growth. They just deal with bringing the plant back into compliance. So it would be, how much would we want to invest to not deal with growth before we did a bigger upgrade to deal with growth? But definitely happy to write a paper on the options that we've investigated to date for Huntly and what could be done, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so, and Sharon, we've also discussed briefly processing biosolids at Huntly.
Yeah. So there is quite a few options for Huntly. It's just what sort of investment we make and what we actually, whether we do growth and compliance or just compliance and biosolids as well and things like that. There's quite a lot on the table there.
Yes, I'd be keen to see those options laid out in a bit more, or some analysis on what they are before, I guess, supporting in principle what's been asked of us today. My second question does relate to Ohinawai and I guess development, and how development and how growth is paying for growth. So I don't know if that's one of the outstanding issues in the plan change process, Gavin, but what's going to happen there? How are Sleepyhead going to fund what's needed to service their development?
So to deal with, and help me out here, Carol, if I get this wrong, but the first stage, which is the foam factory, will be on-site treatment. Going beyond that does require upgrade of Huntly. So that's very, very clear. That's the way the conditions have been set. So we haven't, I mean, we've given Sleepyhead an indication of what we think those costs will be, but we haven't entered into detailed conversation with them on that yet. But I'm imagining it would be a development agreement as opposed to standard development contributions as per our policy. So that would be something we would work with. I think I left a piece out before. So we applied to the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund for funding to upgrade Huntly. We didn't get to the stage of an RFP, which is the next stage for the preferred projects. We're on what's called the reserve list, but we're not dead and buried yet in terms of there's still an option for the Huntley project to move to the next stage through that infrastructure acceleration funding process, but we won't know that now probably for 6 months. It's exactly the same thing. I think Hamilton's got the same situation, Jackie, where they've got some projects in and some projects in that reserve fund as well. Did that answer your question?
Sort of. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is in addressing the budget shortfall and in bringing funding forward, how do we ensure that development is paying their fair share of the upgrade costs that are needed to service them, as well as meet levels of service requirements?
Okay, so it'll be exactly the process we would follow in any of these situations. Work out the amount of where the benefit lies in terms of the upgrade, how much actually relates to a Hinawai, how much relates to the existing properties and network, how much might apply to the Kaiangaroa work as well in terms of their piece as well, and allocating or doing that causal analysis stuff, and from that working out how much actually would relate to Hinawai specifically or to Sleepyhead specifically.
So I guess just to round that off, look, I'm supportive of us investing in improving our overall performance and supporting growth of the community. Just really keen to understand what interim options might be available to improve what's happening for the next couple of years. And if there's headroom in council finances to bring it forward, then I guess in principle, I would support that. Just one final question from me, and it's unrelated, but does council have a discharge consent for overflows from our wastewater network?
Sorry, Jackie, do you mean a global consent or individual consent? So each plant has an individual consent.
No,
not
global. Yeah, not the plants, the networks.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. No.
We did do some preliminary work and on Mary when we were doing that, but at the moment that work has stopped.
The reason I
any
ask
overflow
is,
from the network is a breach. Yes.
Yeah,
it's
and
not even a breach. It's
the reason I ask is I'm aware of other parts of the catchment where there's a significant increase in prosecutions that are occurring because of network overflow. So I guess keen to understand the risk profile for Waikato District for network overflows. Like I do keep an eye on the KPIs that are included in the operations reports. But yeah, just keen to get some advice, I suppose, on whether you think that council should just leave it as it is, or be doing more to understand the frequency and extent of network overflows.
We did draw on Auckland's experience where they've got a network discharge consent and they're allowed so many overflows per network sort of per annum, but that's about as far as it got, Jackie. I think it really needs to be a coordinated approach between all of the councils, because the rules will have to be the same for everyone.
Yeah, I think just something for the board to be aware of, that there's potentially an activity that we don't talk about because it's not a consent that we currently have, that could raise its head.
Yeah, I mean, our approach has been to try and absolutely minimise and limit and respond to events as quickly as possible in an appropriate manner to try and stop the overflow reaching the environment, Jackie, which I imagine is a similar approach to Hamilton.
Yeah, I think exactly as Richard said, the focus for us is obviously not having any overflows, but certainly ensuring there's no overflows to the receiving environment is key, and we've been quite successful with that. Whether there is an alternative approach where some are allowable, it's something I think Richard's correct. It probably needs to be a regional wide approach to actually what is an acceptable level of discharges. But I think the overall focus is that there shouldn't be any, certainly not to the receiving environment.
Well, if the team are able to manage the network so there are no overflows from the wastewater system to the receiving environment, then that's a massive achievement.
There's been a significant investment in the network over the last couple of years with CCTV and management and obviously upgrading. So I think they have done a really amazing job reducing certainly to the environment. It doesn't mean we don't have overflows, clearly we do, but we keep that, the team have done really successfully keeping that out of the environment. Sorry, Richard,
we are fortunate with these smaller networks. Like in Auckland, it's absolutely impossible for that size network, and you're probably similar in Hamilton, not to overflow. But we do have the smallest size networks are easier to manage in this field, and as well as looking at, there's been some really good work done by WDC prior to us going to Watercare as far as replacing at-risk rising mains, getting rid of all our AC ones, and plus putting storage in where appropriate, where we have issues. So, and our network modelling has helped to show where we have issues and try and program projects which rectify those.
No, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. And I think Richard, maybe if through Carol, just have a think about how we might pick that up for discussion later on, given the significance of it. I just have two final questions, comments from Eugene and Keith. Keith, you've had your hand up there for some time.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, just in terms of the Huntly piece, which wasn't mentioned in the report, but one thing council is experiencing is in the growth component, a fair amount of interest either from existing business or new business coming into the district. So I guess one of the things we've got to consider is if we build it, they will come. So we've had expression of interest from other food and beverage businesses wanting to link into the Ahernawai project. So they are seeing another business, I guess, trying to establish and are looking to jump onto the coattails of that, or support the expansion and be part of that new hub, as well as at the same time seeing our existing established businesses also with their own growth aspirations, trying to increase their consented wastewater discharges, and in some cases by 100% on top of their current developer agreement. So just in terms of that overall thought process about Huntly in particular, but maybe other plants, also being able to cater for industrial as well as residential requirements in that 50-year plan. But there is some immediacy around businesses looking for council approval to discharge increased amounts of wastewater. Sorry, that was just a comment.
Keith. Eugene?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just talking about the funding side of this and bringing this forward, the Huntly upgrades forward. Is there, and also with Kaingora's massive interest in Huntly, which is possibly up to 600 on houses, is there any opportunity, Gavin, to work with them on supporting the funding of this, bringing it forward?
I think ultimately, yes. To be fair, the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund is being run by Kaingora. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm just trying to round out this conversation. So I think what we're hearing is, Gavin, is there is support to bring the upgrade forward and to make the investment. I'm just trying to kind of pick up on Jackie's comments around the options. I don't think that prevents that work being done, Sharon, around the interim options, which I think council would want should get a heads up on anyway. So, no, just checking the paper. There's no. So the recommendation, Carol, is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's you're seeking a recommendation from the governance board to what? Is it to council? Are we presenting to council?
I guess because this was just the paper was just to update the board of the resource consents, and then it was a prompt to open discussion on the Huntly wastewater treatment plant. If you'd like us to, as you've mentioned, come back with perhaps another paper looking at what the options are and raise with council at bringing it forward, because we would need to put it into our next annual plan change, which is I think due at the end of December, if we are to move the cost forward. But that sort of has happened since this paper was written.
Okay, so that's not time critical. So you're not having to go to council next week or anything. So we could, I think, are you comfortable with the direction that the board has given today to support the bringing forward of the upgrade? Noting though that there are a few bits of work that we'd appreciate getting an update on at the next meeting, if that was possible, but again, subject to whenever you need this decision to go up to council.
Madam Chair, could I suggest the wording might be to say support in principle? And that way we're kind of saying, yes, we support it in principle, and then that enables the work to be done around, bringing or putting something to council around bringing that forward. Does that make sense, Carol?
Yes, it does, because we need the further investigations to know the new timing, but if we can present it to council through our annual plan change to bring it forward.
I expect they'll have the same questions around funding.
And also not noting, I agree with what was said before, what you said before, Madam Chair, too, around what other immediate or short-term options could be undertaken to improve, to address the compliance issues.
Yeah. Garth?
Well, the only thing I thought is if you already have a preferred project which has gone up for funding, I mean, that's what you're bringing to the council, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So all you're really seeking is to take that preferred and identified project to council for acceleration. So
yeah,
I think you need to say that you have a preferred solution and you're recommending. I'm happy in principle to take the preferred recommendation or the preferred project to council, notwithstanding we can do some of the other perhaps mitigation work earlier, but I don't really want you to have to go back and kind of redefine your project because you've already done that.
Yeah.
We might just have the Honeywell, like what the solution is if Honeywell does go ahead versus doesn't go ahead as well, potentially changes how much we allow for in growth.
Well, depends what your future proofing, what your time frame was when you went up the first time. But anyway, I think if you've got a preferred solution, you've already applied for funding for it. It still makes sense. Use that.
So, Matt, have you got a resolution?
Yeah, basically, well, what I've got at the moment is obviously that the report has been received and that the board supports in principle bringing forward the upgrade of the Huntly wastewater treatment plant. So, yeah. So is that how we'd want to keep it, or would we want to add additional material? Additional wording?
Well, I'd just like you to add the preferred solution. You've already got a preferred solution. So someone on their upgrade in accordance with the preferred solution presented to the, I don't know who the guys were that you put that up to the infrastructure board or something. It's just kind of making sure that it's consistent with what you've already sought funding for in the past. That's all, if it's still relevant.
We didn't actually seek funding for a specific solution. We sought funding to upgrade the plant.
Okay.
But some initial works, as my understanding, Sharon, is that some initial work has been done.
Yes, Gavin. We've Sorry. Yes, we've done quite a bit of work. We've got a full concept study, which has got and Ian was involved in this work along the way. So we've got an option for an ultimate upgrade, so to speak, and some interim upgrades as well. So we've done a proper concept study for this, which is what the funding allocation that was used for the infrastructure acceleration fund was based on. So yeah.
You say?
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
So I think the wording as you have it there, Matt, should suffice. So do you want to just say that one more time and then I'll get a mover in a second?
Yeah, that the resource consent status overview report be received and that the board supports in principle bringing forward the upgrade of the Huntly Wastewater Treatment Plant.
Someone move that way. Thanks, David. Second, Gavin. All those in favour? My aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Good discussion. Final paper here for our open meeting relates to the 2022 schedule of meetings. Matt, did you want to speak to that, or I think it's there for noting? You've already made contact with us.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just bringing it forward. So it's going to be following pretty much the same schedule as this year, except you're just bringing the first meeting forward to the 1st of February. Rather, because essentially at council we have a cycle of meetings, and we're just going to be bringing it forward at the front of the cycle rather at the end after the council meeting. Just means that if there's any work that needs to happen between the council meeting and the Water Governance Board meeting, we're timing it out so then officers can have enough time to do reports and what have you.
Matt, the dates in the recommendation are not consistent with the dates in the body of the paper. So, for example, Tuesday, 23rd of February doesn't exist. I think it's, but is it, are the dates the ones in the recommendation?
Let's have a quick look. Yeah, it's the dates in the recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I can share my screen and show you what the dates are on the attachment, or are we happy just with the dates that are up on there?
Yeah, fine with the dates that are on here. I've got one clash, but yeah. How do we want to deal with that, Matt? So
if there is a clash, what we can do is it's totally up to you whether you'd feel comfortable just allowing someone else to chair for you, or whether you can push it back a day or to the Wednesday.
So let me just check in with the other directors. Do you have those dates and do they all work for you?
In my case, Ruku, the dates and the recommendation, those Tuesdays work for me.
They work for me too.
Jackie, are they fine for you?
I think so, Ruku. I was a bit confused about which ones. I'm just having a quick check.
Okay. Well, I'll make them work. So I think it was.
No, they'll look fine. Thank you.
So Ruku, Madam Chair, if you do have a clash, I mean, we're so far out, we can adjust it, I'm sure. It wouldn't be a problem, I wouldn't imagine.
I know what I've done. I checked the wrong dates. Sorry. It's just so I'm clear. The first meeting's on the 1st of Feb, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we're looking at the wrong dates. So cool. If that's everyone's comfortable, can I just move the schedule of meetings for 2022? Gavin, moves. I'll second. All those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Now that brings us to the end of our open session. We'll now move into public excluded, and seek a recommendation, a approval or resolution to do that, and noting that we will be joined in the public excluded session by members of the Watercare team. Moved Gavin, second David.